The screams will fade into nothing, and nobody will ever know what happened to you. I need you to understand that before I tell you the rest, before I explain how I found it, before I walk you through what was down there in that chamber, you need to know what happens to people who dig too deep into things that weren't meant to be found. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That's what trauma does. It scrambles your timeline, makes you live consequences before you've even explained the choices. My name is Nash. I'm 24 years old, originally from Fort Collins, Colorado, though I've been bouncing around the Front Range for the past few years. Right now, I work at a commercial HVAC company doing installations and repairs. The pay is decent enough to split rent with roommates. I started a business degree at community college when I was 19, made it through a year and a half before I just stopped showing up to classes. Couldn't tell you exactly why I quit. The lectures felt like they were happening to someone else, like I was watching my life through plexiglass. If you'd asked me at 15 what my future looked like, I would have described something stable, normal. My family was the kind you see in Target commercials, Sunday morning pancakes, camping trips to Rocky Mountain National Park, my mom taking photos of us 3 kids in matching Christmas sweaters that we pretended to hate but secretly didn't mind. My dad coached my younger brother's soccer team. My older sister got straight A's and a scholarship to Boulder. We weren't rich, but we were solid, the kind of solid where you don't question whether it'll always be there. Then, 3 weeks after my 16th birthday, my parents sat us down at the kitchen table and announced they were divorcing. No warning, no fights that I'd heard through bedroom walls, just a calm corporate-style announcement that the family unit was dissolving effective immediately. My dad moved out that weekend. My mom started antidepressants and began referring to our childhood as that chapter. My siblings and I never talked about it, not then, not now. We learned to perform normalcy at family gatherings that felt like hostage negotiations. The insomnia started that summer. Not the kind where you toss and turn, the kind where your body forgets how to power down entirely. I'd lie in bed feeling my heartbeat in my fingertips, my thoughts looping through the same questions like a corrupted audio file. What did I miss? What signs did I not see? I started walking at night, sometimes for hours, because movement was the only thing that quieted the static in my head. During the day, I felt like I was operating on a 3-second delay, like my consciousness was buffering. That's when I found the first building, an abandoned textile factory off Highway 287, windows broken out, chain link fence with a gap you could slip through if you turned sideways. I wasn't looking for it. I was just walking, dissociating, and suddenly I was inside. The air smelled like rust and pigeon shit and something else, something organic and patient. It was 60 degrees cooler than outside. The silence had texture to it, thick and complete. For the first time in months, my thoughts went quiet. I sat on the concrete floor for 2 hours that night, just breathing. After that, I went back. Then I found another place. Then another. I bought a better flashlight, then a headlamp. Then proper boots, gloves, a respirator for buildings with asbestos. I learned to move quietly, to read building layouts, to identify which floors would hold my weight. I stumbled into a fentanyl lab once in an old motel, left before anyone saw me. Had a sheriff's deputy chase me out of a condemned grain elevator. Should have stopped. Didn't. By the time I turned 19, I found an apartment with 3 friends from high school. One of them would change everything. The apartment was on the north side of town. Second floor of a converted Victorian that should have been condemned 15 years ago. The landlord charged $800 a month and pretended the black mold in the bathroom was a shadow. Split 4 ways, it was manageable. Martin had the room with the slanted ceiling that gave him migraines. Eddie worked nights at the distribution center and slept during the day with a sleep mask and earplugs. The third roommate was Janum. We met in detention sophomore year. He'd been caught selling counterfeit hall passes he'd designed on his mom's laser printer, complete with a fake administrator signature he'd traced from a letter sent home. I was there for skipping 3 days straight to walk through an abandoned shopping mall 2 towns over. We sat in adjacent desks for 2 hours every afternoon that week, not talking, until Thursday when he leaned over and whispered, "Did you find anything good?" I showed him photos on my phone, cracked skylights throwing cathedral light across empty food courts. A movie theater with the seats still intact, popcorn machines rusted into sculpture. He studied each image like he was reading something written in the grain. That's from 1997, he said, pointing at a promotional poster. "You can tell by the logo design. Place probably closed during the recession." That's how it started. Janum had this thing where he joked about everything, kept up this running commentary that made you think he didn't take anything seriously. But underneath that, he was the most loyal person I've ever known. When my 20th birthday hit during the worst depressive episode I'd had in years, he organized a surprise dinner with exactly 4 people because he knew I couldn't handle more. When I got fired from the hardware store for showing up late too many times, he got me an interview at the warehouse where his uncle worked, then coached me through the application. He picked me up at 2 in the morning more times than I can count, from places I shouldn't have been, asking no questions, just showing up. The kind of friend who remembers what you said 3 months ago when you were drunk and brings it up when it matters. Martin almost died from a rattlesnake bite on a day hike once. He'd stepped over a log and it got him on the calf, and he spent the entire drive to the ER convinced his leg was going to fall off, narrating his own death in real time. "Tell my mom I love her. Tell her I want to be cremated. Actually, no, I want to be buried. Do I want to be buried? Nash, what do I want?" He was fine. They gave him anti-venom and kept him overnight. He still checks every log before he steps over it. Eddie thought we were idiots. "You're going to fall through a floor and die in some building nobody remembers exists," he'd say, eating cereal at the kitchen table before his shift. He wasn't wrong. But by 2021, we'd developed systems. We carried 2 headlamps each, backup batteries, first aid kit, bear spray, a pry bar, leather gloves, respirators, and cameras. We checked weather forecasts. We told someone where we were going. We moved slowly, tested surfaces, never went alone. Janum did the research, finding locations through property records, historical society archives, old Forest Service documents. He built narratives around the places we visited, gave them context and weight. We weren't there to steal or destroy. We documented. We appreciated. We bore witness to things people had built and abandoned, and we tried to understand why. It became ritual. Every other weekend, we'd pack the car and drive. Janum would bring coffee in a thermos that tasted like burnt cardboard but kept us awake. We'd talk about nothing and everything. The exploration itself was almost secondary to the driving, the preparation, the debriefing afterward. Janum found this place on an old Forest Service map earlier that week, a cabin complex on a forestry road between the valley and the peaks. From what we could tell, it had been abandoned since the early 80s. He'd been scrolling through digitized archives from the 60s and 70s, cross-referencing with aerial photos from county records, when he spotted a cluster of structures 23 miles up a forestry road that didn't appear on any modern GPS. The main building measured over 8,000 square feet according to the property records he dug up. A hunting lodge built in 1974 by some timber company executive, abandoned after a fire damaged the east wing in 1982. No one had touched it since. We spent the week preparing like we always did, checked weather reports, loaded batteries, tested headlamps, packed the first aid kit with fresh supplies. Janum made a checklist and went through it 3 times, which wasn't unusual, but he kept pausing between items like he was reconsidering the whole thing. On Thursday night, he called me and said, "We don't have to do this one if you're not feeling it." I told him I was fine. He was quiet for a second. "Yeah, me too." Saturday morning, we loaded the 4Runner before sunrise. Janum brought his thermos of terrible coffee and a bag of trail mix that was mostly M&Ms. He was quiet during the drive, staring out the window at the tree line as we climbed elevation. The road narrowed after the first 10 miles, pavement giving way to gravel, then dirt. We stopped at a 7-Eleven at the base of the mountain to use the bathroom and grab water. The clerk, a kid maybe 19 with a name tag that said Trevor, looked at our gear in the back seat and grinned. "You guys ghost hunters or something?" Janum laughed, but it sounded forced. "Something like that." Trevor leaned on the counter. "My uncle says there's old mining camps up there, says people disappear sometimes, but he also thinks Bigfoot stole his dog, so." We left with bottled water and a weird feeling neither of us mentioned. The temperature dropped as we climbed. Frost clung to the trees, turning everything silver in the early light. We hit the Forest Service gate around 9. It was unlocked, hanging open on rusted hinges, and there were tire tracks in the mud beneath it. Recent ones. Janum noticed them first. "Someone's been up here." I told him it was probably hunters or forestry service doing rounds. He didn't look convinced. We parked a quarter-mile up and went the rest of the way on foot. The air was thin and cold, tasting like pine and something metallic. Then we saw it. Moonlight broke through the canopy and hit the structure, and for a second, neither of us spoke. It was massive. 2 stories, stone foundation, log construction with a pitched roof mostly intact. The front door was carved with intricate wildlife motifs, elk and bears and ravens, the kind of detail that takes months. Janum stepped closer, running his glove over the wood. Someone spent a lot of time on this. It's beautiful. His voice was quiet. And now nobody remembers it exists. The door was damaged near the handle, wood splintered inward. We pushed through. The great room opened up in front of us, 30-foot ceilings with exposed beams, a stone fireplace big enough to stand in, mounted antlers on every wall. The smell hit immediately, mold and rot and old wood, but underneath that something sharper, chemical. Animal droppings scattered across the floor, shredded insulation hung from the ceiling. We moved through systematically. The kitchen still had commercial-grade equipment, steel counters dulled with rust. In the office we found hunting permits from 1978, business correspondence on letterhead so faded we could barely read it. Then we found the intact wing, western exposure, untouched by fire. It was like walking into 1975. Burnt orange carpet, wood paneling, furniture covered in dust but structurally sound. Janum started taking photos, excited now, the anxiety from earlier fading. I got some great shots of light coming through the windows, illuminating particles in the air like snow. We'd been there for about an hour, and I was getting some great shots. Then Janum called out from somewhere deeper in the house, "Dude, you need to see this! I found something!" I followed his voice through a narrow hallway toward what looked like a utility room. The floorboards creaked differently here, hollow underneath. Janum was crouched in the corner, dust streaking his jacket, brushing debris away from something in the floor. A trapdoor, maybe 3 feet square, recessed into the boards with iron hinges thick as my thumb. The padlock that had secured it lay on the floor beside him, freshly cut. The metal shavings were still bright. "Wine cellar, maybe?" Janum said, but his voice had changed, quieter. "Look at this lock, though. That's not original. Someone replaced it recently." He gripped the iron ring and pulled. The door came up with a groan that seemed to vibrate through the floor. Cold air rushed out, sharp and immediate, dropping the temperature 10 degrees in seconds. I stepped closer and aimed my flashlight down. A ladder descended into darkness, metal rungs bolted into rock. I could see maybe 15 feet down before the beam dissolved into nothing. "We should probably head back," I said. "It's getting late." Janum was already testing the first rung with his boot. Only one way to find out what's down there. "Janum, seriously." But he was descending, his flashlight beam swinging wildly below. I listened to his boots hitting each rung, the sound echoing wrong, like the space beneath us was larger than it should be. The cold air kept rising, carrying that chemical smell from earlier but stronger now, mixed with something organic. I went down after him. The ladder was solid, someone had maintained it. Each rung was clean, no rust, no weakness. My hands were sweating inside my gloves despite the cold. 20 rungs down and my boots hit stone. We were standing in a tunnel, not a natural cave. This had been carved out deliberately, the walls showing tool marks, then reinforced with poured concrete. The ceiling was maybe 7 feet high, supported by metal brackets every 6 feet. Professional construction. Janum's flashlight swept the passage. It ran straight for about 40 feet, then opened into something larger. His breath was visible in the beam. "This isn't part of the original foundation," he said. "Someone dug this out later. Look at the concrete work. That's modern technique." We moved forward. Our footsteps echoed differently now, the sound spreading out instead of bouncing back. The tunnel opened into a chamber, and Janum stopped so suddenly I almost walked into him. LED work lights hung from hooks in the ceiling, 4 of them, industrial grade, still connected to a generator in the corner. Janum found the switch and they flickered on, flooding the space with harsh white light that made everything worse. The chamber was maybe 30 feet by 40, concrete floors smooth and deliberately sloped toward a central drain. Chains bolted to the walls at different heights, some at ankle level, some at chest height, some higher, different lengths, different gauges. A mattress in the corner, stained dark in patterns that made my stomach turn. Blue industrial tarps folded against the far wall, scratched and marked and wrong. "This isn't a mine," Janam whispered. This was built for something specific. I could smell it now. Copper and rot and chemicals trying to mask both. Every instinct I had was screaming to climb back up that ladder. But Janam was moving deeper into the chamber, his camera out, documenting. We need to leave, I said. Right now. Then we heard it. Quiet. Almost lost under the hum of the generator. A whimper. Something alive and suffering, coming from the darkness at the back of the chamber. We both froze. Our flashlight beams swung toward the sound at the same time, toward the darkest part of the chamber. And that's when we saw her. The beams found her behind a concrete support pillar in the far corner. She was curled against the wall, knees drawn up, one arm wrapped around herself. Hospital gown, thin cotton, stained yellow and brown. Her feet were bare and the soles were dark with dried blood, fresh cuts still weeping. Her hair hung in matted clumps, blonde underneath the dirt and something darker, early 20s maybe, hard to tell with the hollowness in her face. Her eyes were what stopped me cold, wide open, pale blue, staring straight through us like we were ghosts, not looking at us, looking past us, through us, at nothing. The kind of empty I'd only seen in documentary footage about hostages and torture victims, the kind that meant something inside had already broken. I heard myself gasp. Janam made a sound like he'd been punched. Jesus Christ, he whispered. His flashlight was shaking so badly the beam jumped across the walls. Jesus Christ, she's real. I couldn't move. My body had disconnected from my brain. I was watching this happen from somewhere outside myself, like I was the camera instead of the person holding it. Janam stepped forward, hands up, voice cracking. Hey, we're not going to hurt you. We're going to help you, okay? We're getting you out of here. She didn't respond. Didn't blink. Didn't move. The only sign she was alive was the slight rise and fall of her chest. She's in shock, I said. The words came out flat, clinical, like I was narrating a nature documentary. Severe trauma. She might not even register we're here. Janam's voice went wobbly. We can't leave her. Nash, we can't leave her down here. I know. I pulled out my phone. No signal. The concrete walls were too thick. We were too deep. We'll have to carry her, get her topside and call from there. Can you walk? Janam asked her gently. Can you stand? Nothing. Not even a flicker of recognition. Okay, Janam said. Okay, we'll carry you. It's going to be okay. That's when we heard it. Metal scraping metal, the sound of boots on ladder rungs, slow, deliberate, coming from above. Someone was climbing down. My chest went tight. I spun toward the tunnel entrance, toward the ladder we'd descended. The sound was coming from there. From the only way out. Janam grabbed my arm. Nash! The chamber was mostly open space, a few support pillars, the generator. Nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. The boots hit the concrete floor with a heavy thud. A crouch landing, weight distributed like an animal. Then he stood, unfolding to his full height, 6'2" at least. Broad shoulders under a dark Carhartt jacket, hood pulled up, face lost in shadow. His breath came out in visible puffs in the cold air. He had something in his right hand. Long blade, serrated edge, dark stains on the metal that weren't rust. The kind of knife designed to do maximum damage on the way in and the way out. Well, he said. His voice was calm, conversational, like he'd just walked in on us borrowing his tools. This is unfortunate. My mouth went dry. We were just exploring. We didn't know anyone was here. We'll leave right now. He tilted his head. The hood shifted, but I still couldn't see his face. No, he said simply. You won't. Behind us, the girl made a sound. High-pitched, keening. The noise a dying animal makes when it knows the predator is close. Shut up! The man's voice cracked with sudden rage, the calm mask slipping. He took a step toward us. Janam grabbed one of the LED lights and hurled it at the man's head. It connected with a crack and he stumbled backward. We sprinted for the ladder. My hands hit the rungs and I climbed, fast, frantic. Below me I could hear Janam's boots scraping metal, his breathing ragged and desperate. The ladder shook violently. I looked down once. The hooded man was already at the base, one hand on the bottom rung, the knife still in his other hand. He wasn't rushing, just climbing steady, methodical, like he knew we had nowhere to go. I burst through the trap door and rolled onto the cabin floor. Janum came up right behind me, gasping. We ran. Through the main room, dodging overturned furniture and debris scattered across the floor. My foot caught on something and I went down hard, palms scraping against splintered wood. Janum yanked me up by my jacket and we kept moving. Behind us, I heard the trapdoor slam open against the floor. Footsteps. Getting closer, we hit the front door and exploded into the night. The cold air struck my face like a physical blow, shocking my system. My lungs burned with each breath, the thin mountain air not giving me enough oxygen. We ran full speed toward the parking area, stumbling over roots and rocks in the darkness. I nearly ran face first into a pine tree, veering left at the last second. The Jeep was right where we'd left it. Janum's hands were shaking so badly he dropped the keys twice before getting them into the door. I kept looking back at the cabin, expecting to see the hooded man emerge any second. Finally, the locks clicked. We threw ourselves inside and Janum jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life. He gunned it down the rutted forestry road, sliding around corners, the headlights swinging wildly across tree trunks. Too fast, way too fast for these conditions. The Jeep fishtailed on loose gravel, and I grabbed the oh shit handle above the door. "Slow down," I said. My voice sounded strange, distant. "We're gonna crash." "Not till we're off this mountain." Janum's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. His eyes were wide, unblinking, locked on the road ahead. My whole body was vibrating. Pure adrenaline. I couldn't make my hands stop shaking, couldn't make my breathing slow down. Everything felt too bright, too sharp, tunnel vision closing in around the edges. We hit the main highway and Janum kept driving. 5 miles down, we finally got cell service. He pulled into a scenic overlook and left the engine running, heater blasting. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Just sat there breathing in the warm air, staring out at the darkness beyond the windshield. "What the actual hell did we just see?" Janum finally said. "I don't know." My phone trembled in my hands as I pulled it out. "And I don't want to know." I dialed 911, tried to keep my voice steady as I explained. "Underground chamber, girl in chains, man with a knife." The dispatcher took me seriously, asked sharp professional questions. "Armed and dangerous suspect, possible kidnapping victim." They needed us to wait at the bottom of the forestry road, guide deputies up to the location. "No way," Janum said immediately. "What if he follows us down?" "He won't leave her there," I said. "She's evidence. He can't just abandon her. We don't know what he's capable of." But Janum stayed put, doors locked, engine running, ready to bolt at any sign of headlights coming down the mountain. He kept checking the mirrors, tapping the steering wheel, fidgeting with the heater controls. "Why was she wearing a hospital gown?" he said suddenly. "Like she was taken from a hospital or something?" I thought about the multiple chains, the different lengths, the way they were arranged. "She wasn't the first," I said quietly. Janum went pale. "How many do you think?" My stomach turned. I rolled down the window and spit, trying not to be sick. "How many others? How long had this been going on? And why?" It took 2 hours for a sheriff's SUV to finally show up. 2 deputies, both looking annoyed at being called out to the mountains in the middle of the night. The older one had a thick mustache and kept yawning. The younger one looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. We explained everything again while they took notes with zero urgency. Underground chamber, girl in chains, man with a knife. They exchanged a glance I couldn't quite read. "Show us," the older deputy said. We drove back up in convoy, our headlights cutting through the darkness. Janum's hands were shaking on the wheel. "They're going to find her," he kept saying. "They have to find her." I wanted to believe him. The cabin looked different as we pulled up. Not physically different, but wrong somehow. Like a stage set that had been rearranged between acts. The deputies used their flashlights to sweep the property. Everything looked exactly as we'd left it, except the trapdoor. It was closed. A brand new padlock gleamed in the flashlight beam, the metal still bright from the hardware store. Not rusted, not weathered, fresh. "That wasn't there before," I said. My voice came out strangled. "We left it open. The door was standing open." The older deputy crouched down, examining the lock. "You're sure about that?" "Positive. We ran. We didn't close anything." He pulled out bolt cutters from his belt. The blades closed around the padlock shank and he squeezed. Nothing. He tried again, grunting with effort. The lock didn't even dent. The younger deputy had his hand resting on his weapon. Standard procedure, probably, but it made my skin crawl. Dispatch, this is Unit 7, the older deputy said into his radio. We're going to need proper cutting equipment up here. Static crackled, then a voice. Unit 7, we've got a multi-vehicle on Interstate 25. All available units responding. How urgent is your situation? The deputies looked at each other again. That same unreadable expression. We'll come back tomorrow with the right tools, the older one said, straightening up. Get this open properly. What about the girl? Janam's voice was rising. She's down there right now. If she's down there, she'll still be there in the morning. We need equipment we don't have. They took our contact information. Promised a whole team would come back tomorrow. Proper investigation, full resources. Their taillights disappeared down the mountain and we were alone again. They're not coming back, Janam said. They will. They have to. But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. The next morning I called the sheriff's office. A different deputy answered, one we hadn't met. I gave him our names and asked about the investigation. Let me pull that up, he said. Long pause, keyboard clicking. Says here, deputies found nothing. Old root cellar, some rusted chains, no evidence of recent activity. My blood went cold. That's not possible. We saw her. There was a girl. Report says you two were exploring abandoned buildings. Look, we get a lot of calls from urban legend hunters. Sometimes high altitude can cause visual disturbances, stress, lack of oxygen, darkness. We live in Colorado. We're used to altitude. Just telling you what the report says. His voice was flat, rehearsed. My advice? Stop breaking into abandoned buildings. You're stirring up the wrong people. The line went dead. I wanted to scream, wanted to drive back up there myself. But what would that accomplish? They wouldn't help us, and the darker thought that I couldn't shake, would they help even if they could? Janam took the news worse than I did. He became convinced the sheriff's department was connected somehow, started spending hours on conspiracy forums, cross-referencing missing persons reports. He found 3 women who'd disappeared in the past decade, all in their early 20s, all with dark hair. Related? He asked, showing me the articles on his laptop. I didn't know, didn't want to think about it. He installed a deadbolt on his bedroom door, started checking his apartment locks constantly, multiple times a night. He got my license plate, man, he kept saying. When we drove past him, he saw my plate. A random psycho can't just look up your address, I said, trying to sound confident. That chamber took planning, resources, connections, someone who can make evidence disappear. I hadn't thought of it that way. The realization hit me like ice water. Resources, connections, the ability to make a sheriff's report say whatever you wanted it to say. What kind of person had that power? The next 3 weeks were tense but uneventful. Janam stayed at his mom's in Fort Collins. I went to my dad's in Colorado Springs. We kept in touch by text, both admitting how jumpy we were, basically waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. After 3 weeks, I started to feel stupid, like maybe we'd overreacted. My dad's house was safe, but I had classes, had responsibilities. Janam decided to finish his degree online, just straight up told me he wasn't coming back to the apartment, ever. I understood, but I couldn't afford to do the same. So on a Sunday night in late October, I drove back to our place in Boulder. Martin was at his girlfriend's apartment. Eddie was working the night shift at the Amazon warehouse. The apartment felt hollow when I walked in. Too quiet, but also familiar, safe, in a way my dad's house wasn't. I did homework until my eyes burned, ate leftover pizza, checked the locks twice. The deadbolt Janam had installed was still there. I used it. Around 11, exhaustion hit me like a freight train. 3 weeks of terrible sleep, constant anxiety, the drive back. My body just gave up. I fell asleep the second my head touched the pillow. I don't know what time I woke up, just that something felt wrong. The room was dark, but there was light coming from somewhere. Not right. I always slept with my door closed, always. But now it was open, wide open, and through it, harsh fluorescent light from the hallway poured in. The front door was open too. I could see it from my bed. My first thought was Martin. Came home drunk, forgot to close things. But Martin wasn't home, was supposed to be gone all night. Then I saw him, in the corner of my room, deep shadow by my desk, a figure standing perfectly still. So still, I almost convinced myself it was a coat rack, a pile of clothes, anything else. Then he spoke. Really easy to get in here. I recognized the voice immediately. The same voice from outside the cabin, low, calm, almost friendly. "Your locks are cheap," he continued. "The deadbolt's better, but still, took me maybe 30 seconds. I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. My body felt disconnected from my brain, like sleep paralysis, except I was fully awake. "I've been thinking about killing you," he said. Matter of fact, like discussing the weather. "Been thinking about it a lot, actually." He took a step forward, into the dim light from the hallway, same thick jacket, same hood pulled low. But I could see the blade now, serrated, maybe 7 inches long, catching the light as he moved. "People don't know how to mind their own damn business," he said. "You saw something you weren't supposed to see. You called people. You should not have called. You made things complicated for me." He walked slowly toward my bed, each footstep deliberate, unhurried. "The thing is, I could kill you right now, cut you up into pieces small enough to scatter around the mountains. Nobody would know what happened to you. You'd just be another missing person, last seen breaking into abandoned places." He reached the foot of my bed, stood there looking down at me. Then, with his free hand, he reached for my bedroom door, started closing it, slowly, the light from the hallway narrowing to a sliver, then disappearing completely. That broke whatever paralysis held me, lightning strike of adrenaline. I rolled off the opposite side of the bed, scrambled for the window. I'd never opened it before, didn't know if it would even open, yanked with everything I had, stuck, then suddenly giving way with a metal shriek. I heard him curse behind me. Rapid footsteps coming around the bed. I dove through the window, landed hard on the concrete walkway below. Something in my shoulder popped, bright pain that I barely registered. I ran barefoot in boxers and a t-shirt, maybe 40 degrees outside. Sprinted down the alley behind our building, heard his footsteps behind me. Heavy, close, ran harder than I'd ever run in my life. Burst onto the main road. Cars, streetlights, witnesses, spun around expecting him right behind me. He'd stopped at the alley mouth, weapon hidden behind his back, just staring at me, him in shadows, me standing in the middle of the street like a crazy person. A passing car honked. I made it to the sidewalk. He turned and walked away, disappeared into the dark like he'd never been there at all. I borrowed a phone from someone at a gas station, called 911. This time they took it seriously. Breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon, attempted murder, real charges, real response. They found our apartment door still open, some of the rooms ransacked, and the window I'd escaped through still gaping. They took fingerprints, but I knew they wouldn't find anything useful. This guy was too careful for that. The police promised increased patrols around the building, but I could hear the skepticism in my own voice when I thanked them. Increased patrols wouldn't stop someone who could walk into a locked apartment and stand at the foot of my bed. I moved out the next morning. Didn't pack most of my things, just grabbed essentials, camera equipment, clothes, documents. I was running, and I knew it. Martin and Eddie moved out the same week. Our landlord was furious about the broken lease, threatening legal action over unpaid rent. I didn't care. Bad credit versus being dead seemed like an easy choice. I moved to my father's house in Pueblo, a place I could afford to breathe for a while. Haven't been back to the northern mountains since. Martin called me about 3 months later, said he'd driven past the area out of morbid curiosity. The cabin had burned down, completely destroyed. Whether it was arson or wildfire, he couldn't tell, but the timing felt deliberate. He said he looked around the perimeter, tried to find where the underground chamber would have been. Nothing. No evidence of any structure beneath the ground, no evidence of the girl, nothing. I doubt they investigated very thoroughly. Too scared. Can't blame them. The nightmares started about a week after I moved. Always the same. Those eyes, that empty stare looking up at me from the filthy mattress, the sound she made, that awful whimpering. I wake up wondering if she was even alive when I saw her. Can't remember if I saw her breathing. Was it a death rattle I heard? And if she was alive, was she still there when the place burned? The thought makes me physically sick. Sometimes I dream about the man in the corner instead. The way he turned his head. The deliberate slowness of it. Like he had all the time in the world. It took me 2 years before I could go back to urban exploration. Even now, I only visit places that are well known and well documented, places where other people regularly visit. I never go alone. I always tell multiple people exactly where I'm going and when I'll be back. I carry a knife now, a fixed blade, 4 inches, strapped to my ankle. My father, who was anti-gun his entire life, insisted I get a concealed carry permit, bought me the pistol himself. That's how worried he is. I moved into an apartment with real security, actual deadbolts that can't be pried apart with a crowbar, a reinforced door frame, third-floor walk-up with no fire escape outside my window. The worst part is not knowing. Who was she? What was that room actually for? Human trafficking? Snuff films? Serial killer's trophy room? Whoever he was, he knew how to find names and addresses from a license plate. He had connections, resources. I can't help thinking that means institutional involvement, some kind of protection. About 6 months ago, I did a Google search about the location, found something interesting. The land where that cabin stood was leased by a government agency, Bureau of Land Management contract that started around 2003. I couldn't find any record of the lease being terminated or transferred, meaning as far as public records show, that land is still leased to some government entity. How does that connect? Or am I just connecting ghost dots, seeing patterns where there's only chaos? I have no answers, no closure, just questions that circle endlessly in my head, and that girl's face burned into my memory. The way her eyes didn't quite focus, the sound she made, whether she felt the flames. I've never told this story publicly before, and I'm only sharing it now anonymously because I feel like people should know. The Colorado mountains are beautiful, but they're also vast and isolated, perfect for hiding terrible secrets. I know this isn't the kind of ending people want. There's no resolution, no justice, no closure. The girl's identity remains unknown. The hooded man was never caught. The underground room was never officially investigated. I understand that's frustrating. Believe me, I live with that frustration every single day. But I've never told this story publicly before, and I'm only sharing it now anonymously because I feel like people should know. The Colorado mountains are beautiful, spectacular even, but they're also vast and isolated, perfect for hiding terrible secrets, perfect for making people disappear. If you're someone who enjoys urban exploration, who gets that thrill from entering abandoned buildings and documenting forgotten places, I need you to hear this. Be careful about every single building you enter. Research it beforehand. Know who owns the property. Check for recent activity. Look for signs of current use, fresh tire tracks, recently disturbed ground, anything that suggests the place isn't as abandoned as it appears. And here's my best advice, the thing that might save your life. If a place doesn't look completely abandoned, if there's any doubt whatsoever, leave immediately. Don't investigate further. Don't try to get one more photo. Don't convince yourself you're being paranoid. Just leave. I know it might not seem like a big deal. Urban exploration feels nostalgic and wholesome, documenting history before it crumbles away completely. But if you're not careful, you can get caught up in something that drags your entire life down into pits you didn't know existed. Something that makes you carry a knife everywhere. Something that makes your father, who spent 60 years opposing gun ownership, drive you to the range himself and watch you practice until your hands stop shaking enough to hit the target. I'm a different person now. I check my rearview mirror compulsively. I photograph every car that parks near my apartment building. I have a bug-out bag packed by my door with cash, documents, and supplies. My apartment lease is month to month, so I can leave without penalty if I need to. I've planned escape routes from every room. That's not paranoia. That's survival when you've seen what I've seen, when you know what's possible in those isolated places where cell phones don't work and screams don't carry. The government lease bothers me most. It's a thread I can't stop pulling even though I know it's dangerous. What agency needs a remote cabin with an underground chamber? What operation requires that level of secrecy and isolation? And why hasn't anyone investigated? I've filed Freedom of Information Act requests. They come back heavily redacted or denied for national security reasons. National security. What does that even mean in this context? I still think about her constantly. The girl in that photograph. Who was she? Did she have a family searching for her? Did anyone report her missing? Does anyone besides me remember she existed? I hope she died quickly in that fire. I hope she didn't suffer. But I don't know. I'll never know. That's the burden I carry, the not knowing, the questions that circle endlessly with no possibility of answers. So please, if you take anything from this story, let it be caution. Let it be awareness that beautiful places can hide horrific secrets. That isolation cuts both ways, offering